You haven't stopped believing, you've simply changed the object of your faith. Point 1. If, my friend, you've abandoned your faith in God today because you haven't found answers to many questions, such as: why does God allow evil on earth? Why doesn't He appear to people today as clearly as before? Why does so much remain unclear? And these questions have confused you so much that you've turned away from God and embraced atheism. Then stop for a moment and think. Have you truly stopped believing, or have you simply started believing in something else? Because a person cannot live without faith. It's impossible. Faith isn't just religion. Faith is the foundation of our perception of the world. An atheist says, I don't believe in God. But instead, he begins to believe that everything happens spontaneously. He believes that no one created the world. He believes that there is no supreme intelligence. He believes that everything arose without purpose and without cause. This is also faith. The only difference is that before you believed the world was created by reason, but now you believe it arose without reason. Before you believed there was a creator. Now you believe there is no creator. But you still believe. Because a person cannot rid themselves of faith. They can only change the direction of their faith. So, friend, when you say, I no longer believe, you haven't actually stopped believing. You've simply chosen to believe in something else. And the question now isn't whether you will believe. The only question is, what exactly will you choose to believe? Point 2. We believe history because we weren't witnesses to it. Let's think honestly, friend. Everything we know about history, we know not because we saw it with our own eyes, but because we were told about it. We believe that great empires existed. We believe that wars took place. We believe that kings, rulers, and nations lived. But we didn't personally witness any of these events. We weren't there. We didn't witness a single ancient battle with our own eyes. We didn't hear the voices of kings. We didn't stand beside them. All we have are books, records, documents, and testimonies that have come down to us through other people. And we accept this on faith. We trust historians. We trust archaeologists. We trust textbooks. We trust those who lived before us and left their records. But think about it. A historian is also human. They can make mistakes. They can be ignorant of something. They can draw the wrong conclusion. And sometimes, people have even deliberately distorted history. History has been rewritten many times. What was once considered true later turned out to be wrong. What entire generations had been taught was later revised. Some events were hushed up, others were exaggerated, and still others were explained completely differently. And when this happened, people began to believe the new version. This demonstrates a simple truth. Our knowledge of history is based on trust. We trust the sources that have reached us. We trust the people who interpret them. But we have no absolute, personal proof. We cannot go back in time and verify everything ourselves. Therefore, when someone says, I believe historical facts, they are really saying, I trust the testimonies that have reached me. This is also a form of faith. And this is normal. Because that's how humans are wired. We accept many things not because we have seen them ourselves, but because we trust the testimony. And if we accept even human history by faith, then why does it seem strange to accept by faith the existence of God, to whom ancient sources that have reached us through the centuries also testify? Point 3. We even believe who our parents are. There's another simple, yet profound example of how faith operates in our daily lives: our parents. Every person believes from childhood that the people they call their father and mother are truly their biological parents. They don't demand proof. They don't do tests. They don't check documents. They simply accept it as truth. Why? Because they were told so. Because they trust. This belief is so natural that a person doesn't even think about it. They live their entire lives without a second's doubt. But we know that there are cases when, years later, it's discovered that a person was adopted. Or that one of their parents isn't biological. And for a person, this comes as a profound shock, not because their life changed in that moment, but because what they'd believed their entire life has changed. This demonstrates an important truth. Even a person's most fundamental beliefs are based on trust. A person can't personally verify everything. He wasn't present at his conception. He didn't witness his birth from the outside. He accepts it by faith, based on the testimony of others. And mind you, this is normal. This doesn't make a person weak or naive. It simply shows that trust is an integral part of human life. We live by testimony. We believe words. We believe people. We believe what has been passed down to us. And if a person accepts by faith even the source of his physical origin, then why does it seem impossible to accept by faith the source of the entire world? Faith accompanies a person from the very beginning of their life and remains with them until the very end. Point 4. We trust our feelings, even though we've never fully verified them. There's another thing a person rarely considers, that they constantly trust their own feelings. Every day, we look at the world around us and are confident that we see reality as it is. We see objects, people, the sky, the earth, and we don't even doubt that all of this really exists exactly as we perceive it. But if we think deeper, we realize that we don't actually see the object itself directly. We see light reflected from the object. This light enters our eyes, is converted into electrical signals, is transmitted along nerve fibers to the brain, and the brain then creates an image of what we call vision. In other words, we essentially trust the process occurring within us and believe that it doesn't deceive us. The same thing happens with touch. If you pick up a pen, for example, you're sure that you're holding a pen. Even if you close your eyes, you'll still say, it's a pen, because the nerve endings in your fingers transmit signals to the brain, and the brain interprets them. But you don't see the atoms. You don't see the structure of this object. You trust your senses. You trust your senses. And yet, we know that senses can deceive. For example, there are optical illusions, when the eyes show one thing, but in reality, everything is different. It happens that in the dark, a person mistakes one object for another. It happens that after sleep, a person thinks the dream was real. This shows that even our perception of the world is based on trust. We don't check every second whether what we see is real. We simply accept it by faith. And if a person lives every day, trusting their eyes, their ears, and their senses, then they are already living by faith even if they themselves don't notice it. Because faith is not only a religious concept. It is the foundation of how a person perceives all of reality. Point 5. We trust scientific evidence because we don't personally verify it. Many people say, I only believe science. I only believe what's proven. But if you think deeper, it becomes clear that even in this case, people rely on trust. Because none of us personally verified every scientific discovery. We didn't conduct the experiments that led to scientific conclusions. We didn't build telescopes to personally verify what astronomers see. We didn't fly into space to see planets with our own eyes. We haven't been in laboratories studying atoms, molecules, or distant galaxies. We accept this based on the testimony of others. We trust scientists. We trust textbooks. We trust science books. We trust the photographs we're shown. We trust the instruments that were created by other people. But an instrument is just a tool. And people trust that this instrument works correctly. They trust that the data is not distorted. They trust that the information was transmitted honestly and without error. And again, we see that trust is at the core. For example, when a person looks at a photograph of a distant galaxy, they believe it is truly a galaxy, not an instrumental error or a distorted image. They trust those who took the image and explained what it shows. When a person reads a scientific book, they trust the author. They trust that the author is telling the truth and has correctly understood what they studied. This doesn't mean that science is false. It means that a person personally accepts scientific conclusions through trust in the testimony of others. And so it turns out that when a person says, "I don't believe I know," in reality, they only know what they have accepted based on trust in those who researched it. Thus, even scientific knowledge enters a person's life through trust. And therefore, faith is present here too. Point 6. A person can believe and later realize they could have been wrong. There's another important truth that needs to be honest. A person can be absolutely certain of something, believe it with all their heart, and later discover they could have been wrong. For example, a person can believe what they see in photographs, in films, in the news. They can be sure it's true because it looks convincing. They can have no doubts because it's presented to them as fact. And they believe. But time passes, and the person begins to ask questions. They begin to reflect. They begin to understand that not everything they see is necessarily the complete and final truth. They understand that information comes through people, and people can make mistakes or convey information incompletely. And then the person realizes that their belief was based on trust in the source. This shows that faith is present even when a person thinks they simply know. At first, a person believes because they were told. Because they were shown. Because it sounds convincing. But later he may reconsider. This happens because a person doesn't personally witness all events. He accepts many things based on the testimony of others. And this again confirms a simple truth. A person lives based on trust. He trusts sources of information. He trusts people. He trusts what is presented to him as fact. And only after some time does he sometimes realize that his faith may have been based not on complete knowledge, but on trust. This is not a human weakness, it is a natural part of human life. Because it is impossible to personally verify everything. Therefore, a person inevitably lives by faith even when he thinks he simply knows. Point 7. A person cannot know everything, and the absence of an answer does not mean the absence of truth. There are questions that a person cannot answer. And this must be acknowledged honestly. No person knows everything. Our minds are limited. Our experience is limited. Our understanding is limited. It is written that the eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. No matter how much a person sees, no matter how much he hears, he still cannot know absolutely everything. For example, we do not know why Jesus Christ did not appear to everyone on earth immediately after his resurrection. It would seem that if he had appeared to everyone, no one would have doubted. We do not know why on the Mount of Transfiguration he appeared only to the disciples and not to all the people. We do not know the answers to many questions. And it is important to understand. The absence of an answer does not mean the absence of truth. There are many things in life that exist even if a person does not fully understand them. For example, a small child does not understand how electricity works. He doesn't understand how the light comes on. But that doesn't mean electricity doesn't exist. Likewise, a person may not understand all of God's actions. He may not understand why God acts the way he does. But that doesn't mean God doesn't exist. It only means that human understanding is limited. Therefore, if a person abandons belief in God simply because they haven't found answers to all their questions, they are drawing a conclusion not from complete knowledge, but from their own limitations. But human limitations don't negate the existence of truth. A person can't know everything, but they can choose whether to pursue the truth further or to dwell on their doubts. Point 8. Atheism also requires faith because it answers questions for which there is no personal testimony. Many people think that atheism is a lack of faith. They say, "I don't believe, I just accept the facts." But if we think deeper, it becomes clear that atheism is also based on certain beliefs that a person accepts without having personally witnessed them. For example, atheism asserts that the universe arose without an intelligent creator. That everything that exists, space, matter, the laws of nature, life, and consciousness, came into existence naturally. But no one witnessed the beginning of the universe. No one witnessed the creation of matter with their own eyes. No one personally observed the emergence of the first life forms. These are conclusions that a person accepts by trusting certain explanations, theories, and interpretations. For example, it is said that the universe had a beginning. But a person accepts this not because they were there, but because they trust the explanations they have been presented with. And again, we see that trust is at the core. A person chooses what to trust. To believe that everything has an intelligent origin, or to believe that everything arose without the participation of intelligence. But in both cases, they accept something they have not personally witnessed. And so, when someone says they don't believe in anything, it's not entirely accurate. Because they still accept a certain explanation for the origins of the world. This means that the question isn't whether a person will believe or not. The question is which explanation they will accept as true. Because in questions about the origins of the world, each person relies not on personal observation, but on trust in the explanation they find most convincing. Point 9. A person cannot be convinced unless they themselves want to seek the truth. There is another important truth. A person cannot be convinced unless they themselves want to be convinced. You can present the most powerful arguments. You can explain, cite examples, show evidence. But if a person is not internally ready to accept the truth, they will not accept it. Because faith and conviction are not only a matter of information, but also a matter of human desire. For example, there are people who commit evil, fully understanding that it is evil. They know it is wrong. They know it's harmful. But they continue to do it. Why? Because it's not that they don't understand. It's that they don't want to change their path. The same thing happens in matters of faith. Sometimes a person hears the truth. Sometimes he understands it intellectually. But if his heart lacks the desire to accept it, he rejects it. He may seek other explanations. He may doubt. He may argue. But the reason is often not a lack of arguments, but an unwillingness to accept what these arguments lead to. Truth is revealed not only to those who listen, but to those who want to hear. Therefore, it is impossible to force a person to believe. It is impossible to force them to accept the truth. A person must want to seek for himself. He must want to understand for himself. He must want to accept for himself. And only then does the truth become real for him. Point 10. A person will still believe, the only question is what exactly. It's important to understand one simple yet profound truth. A person cannot live without faith. They may say, "I don't believe in anything anymore," but in reality, this is impossible. Because even this statement is already based on a certain belief they accept. Each person chooses how to explain their existence, the origin of the world, and the meaning of life. Either they believe that everything has an intelligent beginning, that there is a creator who created the world and governs it. Or they believe that everything arose spontaneously, without intelligence, without purpose, and without a higher design. But in both cases, a person accepts a certain explanation, one they haven't witnessed with their own eyes. They weren't present at the beginning of the world. They didn't personally observe the origin of the universe. They accept the explanation they find most convincing. And this means they still believe. A person can change their beliefs. They can change the direction of their faith. But he cannot completely rid himself of it. Because faith is part of human nature itself. He believes what he considers true. Therefore, the question is not whether a person will believe or not. The only question is, which explanation will he accept and what will he trust with his life? Every person makes this choice. Point 11. Conclusion. Every person makes their own choice of faith. Therefore, friend, if you have abandoned faith in God, it is important to understand that you have not stopped believing altogether, you have simply chosen to believe in something else. Because a person cannot live without faith. He will still trust a certain explanation for the world, his existence, and the meaning of life. Either he believes that everything that exists, heaven, earth, life, and man himself, has a creator and an intelligent origin. Or he believes that all of this arose spontaneously, without reason, without purpose, and without design. But if you think deeper, believing in an intelligent origin is even easier than believing in a random origin. Because every day in life we see a simple principle. Everything that has order, form, and purpose also has a creator. When you see a house, you understand that a builder built it. When you see a book, you understand that an author wrote it. When you see a clock, you understand that a master craftsman created it. No one thinks that a house appeared by itself. No one thinks that a book wrote itself. No one thinks that a complex mechanism arose by chance. Because order indicates intelligence. And the universe is far more complex than any house. Life is far more complex than any machine. Human beings are far more complex than any device. And therefore, it is natural and reasonable to accept that all of this has an intelligent beginning. It is much more difficult to believe that order arose from complete chaos, that intelligence arose from the irrational, that life arose from the inanimate by itself. Therefore, my friend, it is important not to simply reject faith in God because there are questions that remain unanswered. Because there will always be questions. No one can know everything. But man can seek truth. And if man sincerely seeks truth, he must be honest with himself and acknowledge that faith accompanies him throughout his life in what he knows, what he accepts, and what he trusts. Therefore, I urge you. Use your mind, reflect, seek the truth, and do not reject God just because not all questions are answered today. Because the lack of complete understanding does not mean the absence of truth. And every person one day makes their own choice, what they will believe and what they will build their life on.